Alright, today we're going to be talking about several things. We're going to name the three major processes in the water cycle, the properties of ocean water, two types of ocean currents, and how the ocean helps to regulate Earth's temperature. So this is Roman numeral 3, the oceans in the hydrosphere. Number 1. One requirement of living things is liquid water. B. The hydrosphere is the part of the Earth that includes all the water near or on the Earth's surface. One thing about Earth that is unusual is that we are the only planet that we've ever found that has liquid water on the surface. We are located exactly the right distance from the sun so that our temperature, our average temperature, is halfway between the freezing point and the boiling point of water. There is water located on a lot of other planets, but it's either frozen or it is in the form of a gas. We're the only one that has liquid water. So, when we talk about the hydrosphere, this includes the oceans, rivers, lakes, ice caps, water and soil and rocks, and clouds. So all the different forms of water. You notice on Earth's surface we have all three states. We have solid, which is ice, we have liquid, and we have gas, which would be the clouds and in the atmosphere. C. The water cycle is the continuous movement of water from water sources to air to land and back to water sources. Now, when we say the word cycle, that implies a circle. In other words, there is not really a beginning point or an ending point. We just have to pick a place to start in order to talk about it. So, number one part of the water cycle is evaporation, which is the process by which liquid water changes to water vapor due to heat from the sun. Most of the evaporation is from the oceans into the atmosphere, and that should make sense. 75% of the Earth's surface is covered with water, so it would make sense that most of the water being evaporated from the Earth's surface is from the oceans. Number 2, another part of the water cycle is condensation, which is the process by which water vapor, which is a gas, form water droplets, which is a liquid. This is usually in the form of clouds. So if you look at this diagram, here we have evaporation going on right here from the oceans, from water in the soil, and then from fresh water like lakes. It evaporates into the atmosphere. As the water vapor, then the vapor gaseous water, as it rises in the atmosphere, then the temperature starts to cool down and it turns back into liquid water in the form of tiny droplets, and that's how we get clouds. So the water then that was a vapor condenses into a liquid and we get clouds right here. Number 3. The third part of the water cycle is precipitation, which is the process by which the liquid water droplets in the atmosphere clump together and fall to the ground. It can take the form of rain, snow, sleet, or hail. So, depending on temperature conditions in the air, then the water can fall in all different forms. It can form as dew, which is where water condenses from the air onto cooler objects like leaves or grass, and so you've got the liquid water there. It can be in any of these forms shown in this picture right here. So what happens is the water vapor in the air, when it turns into liquid, the drops are very, very small, so that they are small enough that the wind currents can keep them up into the air. But once they start clumping together, they get too heavy and gravity causes them to fall. Number 4, upon reaching the ground, The water eventually finds its way back to a water source, such as a river or ocean, in a process called runoff. So here's our evaporation. It then condenses back into a liquid and forms clouds. Once the water droplets start clumping together, they're too heavy, and so then they fall to the ground as precipitation, and then they have runoff where they start collecting in lower places like rivers, lakes, and eventually they run out into the ocean, and it starts all over. D. All the Earth's oceans are interconnected into a world ocean. Oceans cover over 70% of the Earth's surface. So if you look at this diagram, you can see that even though we have separate names for these oceans, they're really all one big ocean because they all connect to each other at some point. E, there are 5 oceans. Now this is different than what scientists used to say or geographers used to say. In the past, they've always just gone with 4 oceans. But now, scientists now say that all of this water that surrounds Antarctica down here is big enough to be considered its own ocean. So they call it the Southern Ocean. And it basically connects the bottom of all of these other oceans. Number 1, the Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean. It contains the deepest point on Earth called the Challenger Deep. So if I look at this map between North and South America and Asia and Australia is the Pacific Ocean. It is the biggest one. And if you look at this diagram, Challenger Deep is located right over here in this area right in here. And this other picture is actually going to show it to you a little better. Here is Japan and the Philippines, and in this area where you see the Mariana Trench, right close to Guam, the Challenger Deep is actually located there in the Mariana Trench. Number 2, the Atlantic Ocean is the second largest ocean, and it's about half the size of the Pacific Ocean. So this is the Atlantic Ocean that is between North and South America and Europe and Asia. Number 3, the Indian Ocean is the third largest ocean, and most of it is located in the southern hemisphere. So this is the Indian Ocean. This is the one that back in 2006, I believe it was, is when the earthquake happened and caused the tsunami that killed several 100,000 people. Number 4, the Arctic Ocean is the smallest ocean. It's located up here where the North Pole is at the top of the Earth. Much of its surface is covered by floating ice called pack ice. And in some places, some books, you see it called sea ice. Number 5, the Southern Ocean connects all but the Arctic Ocean. It is located around Antarctica in the southern hemisphere. So now if I'm looking at the South Pole, here is Antarctica, and the Southern Ocean is what surrounds it. F, the salt in the oceans come from salts dissolved out of rocks that was then carried by bodies of water to the oceans. So in other words, the salt in the ocean is where all of the stuff that got emptied from rivers and lakes and streams, even though that's fresh water, it was also carrying stuff that it had dissolved from wherever its riverbed was, like rocks and things like that. About 86% of the salt in the ocean is sodium chloride. So if you look at this chart, you can see the green is chlorine and the red is sodium. If you add those two together to get sodium chloride, that's where you get the 86%. So of the salt in the ocean, 86% is sodium chloride. Salts is a category of substances. So we have other salts that are also present besides those. The percentage of dissolved salts in the ocean is called its salinity. So when we look at how much salt is dissolved in the ocean as a percentage, it's referred to as salinity, kind of like the saline solution that you use to wash your contacts. That's where it comes from. That means salty. G, water in the oceans can be divided into 3 zones based on the temperature. Number 1, the surface zone is the warm top layer of water, and it is heated by sunlight. So it should make sense to you that that's going to be the warmest layer. It's at the surface. It's the one that gets all of the sunlight. Now, the thing about it is that the sunlight has the ability to warm the water at the surface, but you don't have to go very deep before all of the heat has run out and been absorbed by the water. Number 2, the thermocline is below the surface zone. In this zone, the temperature drops rapidly. So what happens is all of the heat energy gets used up at the surface. So once you get to a certain depth, the temperature starts to drop really, really fast. So if you look at this picture, here is the warm surface water, but when you get down to this area right here, at the bottom of the surface water, then all of the heat has been used up. And so in this area called the thermocline, then you get a really, really fast drop in temperature. Number 3, the deep zone is the zone where there is no sunlight, so it has temperatures that average about 2 degrees Celsius. So all of this layer down here, there is no sunlight that can reach that deep. So its temperature is about 2 Celsius. That's only 2 degrees above the freezing point of water, which is 0. So this water is extremely cold, which affects what can live there. H, one of the most important functions of the oceans is to absorb and store energy from the sun. Water has the ability to absorb lots of heat before its temperature starts going up. It takes a lot of heat for water's temperature to go up for 1 degree, more than any other substance. So that means that it has the ability to absorb lots and lots more energy than the land does before its temperature rises. So because the oceans cover so much of Earth's surface, that also means that helps regulate the Earth's temperatures. The water's temperature is very slow to rise, and it's also very slow to drop. So that means that the Earth's temperature overall stays in a pretty narrow range. Letter I, because the oceans absorb and lose heat more slowly than the land does, the Earth's overall temperature stays in a narrow range instead of changing from extremely cold to extremely hot. Other planets do that. They are very cold at night and very warm during the day, and their temperature may change several hundred degrees between day and night, while our temperatures, because of the oceans, only change about 20 to 30 degrees between day and night. So that keeps the Earth being in a very comfortable range and makes it easier for humans and any other kind of life to survive. J, ocean currents also affect the climate. Number 1, surface currents carry water near the surface. The warm currents and cold currents don't mix well, so warm water can be carried near the polar regions and cause the climate in that area to be milder than expected. Now here's what we're saying. If you look at this picture, this map, in Great Britain is the example we're going to use. Here is the United States right here, and this little bitty area right here is Great Britain. Now here's what I want you to notice. This current right here where it's red is a warm ocean current. It passes through here. This is the equator and along in this area. So it's really warm. It doesn't mix with the cold water well, and as it moves, look where it's going. It is going right up beside Great Britain. Now here's what I want you to notice. If you look straight across, this is Canada. Think about what we think of as the temperature and the weather in Canada. It's usually considered to be very cold. It does, even in the summertime, it doesn't get real warm. But you're talking about a place that is at the same latitude right here. You would think then that Great Britain should be very cold also, but it's not. It actually has very mild temperatures, kind of like what we have. And the reason is this warm ocean current right here. That warm water that runs right past there causes the climate in this area to be very mild considering how far north it is. So ocean currents have a huge impact on the climate of a particular area. K. Deep currents are streams of cold, dense water that move along the ocean floor. So this is the cold water that has sunk to the bottom. It says they usually sink to the bottom near the polar regions and move toward the equator. Because they're cold, they're moving along the bottom, and they also move very slowly. It says they may take several hundred years to do this. So the water is traveling very slowly. If you'll look, this is another picture of the same one I was showing you before. Here's Great Britain. Here is the United States. We're right here. Here is Canada. Here is that warm Gulf Stream that's moving up this way and causes Great Britain to have warmer climate than you would imagine to be as far north it is. As it moves up here, it cools off. It's in the polar regions. It cools off and sinks to the bottom. And then what happens is it slows down, and it may take a long time for it to then travel further south, and then as it gets further south and down closer to the equator, it may begin to warm up again. And that's all for today.